Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at one of the weirdest guns in any game ever, I think. We're going to be taking a look at the K9000 Cybernetic Dog Gun, which is a strange weapon, and we're also going to be taking a look at its unique version, Fido. So, the K9000 gun is going to be one of the guns that you find in Old World Blues. It's sort of a unique weapon, but not really, because you can have multiple of these. You can actually have multiple of the unique versions too, which makes it, I guess, less rare overall too. So the K9000 gun is given to you at the very start of Old World Blues. It is your main gun, at least the gun that they give you, because Old World Blues doesn't really have a whole lot of guns. It's mostly known for energy weapons, and this is a gun that you can actually use there. These do use different ammos though. The K9000 uses the 357 round, Fido uses the 44 round, so ammo types are going to be a little bit different between these. For the basic stats, the K9000 gun requires 75 guns and 8 strength. A lot of strength, a lot of guns to use this effectively. This one does 26 damage per shot, which is fairly decent. It's not one of the highest 357 guns, but it is the only full auto version of it, so it kind of makes sense to have a little bit lower damage. This one does 182 damage per second, so that's quite high. Has 13 crit damage. Weirdly enough, the crit damage is actually cut in half from its regular damage. I don't know why that is, maybe just because it's a full auto gun like this. This one has a low crit chance though, like most full auto guns, at 0.06 times, so you're not going to be hitting crits with it super often. This only costs 27 action points though, weirdly enough. It's actually pretty decent in a VATS build. Both these weapons kind of are, so that's cool. This holds 50 rounds in it. This has a 1.35 spread, so it isn't very accurate, especially at longer ranges. The spread kind of goes all over the place. Also, it seems like bullets sometimes just don't render in. I don't know if that's actually bullets not rendering in or just you can't see them flying towards the enemy. For whatever reason, that seemed to happen to me quite a bit whenever I've been using this weapon. This weapon weighs 27 weight, so it is very heavy, although you can cut it in half with heavyweight because it is over 10 weight, so that's kind of nice. And this has 500 item health, which is kind of okay. Full auto weapons tend to break through their health pretty quick, but 500 is usually enough, especially for something like this that's shooting 357, where you may not be having as many bullets as something like a minigun or a light machine gun, where it's just not as common. For the general pros of the K9000, this one does have good ammo. 357 rounds are really good, 44 rounds are really good too, so good ammo all the way around. This one has good DPS, as you would hope for a big weapon like this that's full auto, and this is a very unique weapon. You could count that as a pro or a con, depending on what you consider unique, because this weapon does look weird. It's got a dog brain in it, it's got a dog sticker on it, it's got ears that move. It growls. That's another weird thing about this gun, is that it growls if there's enemies nearby, and that can kind of throw you off. It always throws me off whenever I actually have this weapon equipped. So yeah, pros or cons there with how weird it is. For the major con though, this one is heavy. 27 weight is quite a bit, and it gets even heavier if you're playing on the hardcore difficulty and you need to carry around a lot of ammo, which you probably will for most full auto weapons. And even though 357 and 44 aren't the heaviest round in the game, they are still not necessarily the lightest round either. There isn't really any perks that directly help with these weapons, so the only two perks that I would kind of recommend if you want to be taking these would be like heavyweight to cut its weight in half. 27 weight is pretty heavy. You can drop it down to 13.5. That's still a little bit heavy, but it's not as bad. And then pack rat if you're playing on the hardcore difficulty, so that you can cut all of your ammo's weight in half. That does help out quite a bit. Other than that, there's no designated perk that actually helps out with this, like cowboy or grunt. Although I guess grunt could, because they were trying to make this into like a, I assume, military weapon. At the very least, maybe a police weapon or something. I'm not entirely sure. So maybe in some other version of Fallout or in a modded version of Fallout, grunt would work for this. Let's talk about the different ammos too that go to this. For the 357, we have the standard 357 rounds. These ones deal regular damage. They don't have any armor breaking. They're just very standard rounds. You've got the hollow point rounds, which make it so you get more damage, but enemies get more armor. So they're not good against armored enemies, but they are good against light armored enemies or non-armored enemies. Then you have the 38 special rounds. These ones you can usually buy in bulk, and they make it so your gun breaks slower, but you also do less damage. So kind of a trade-off there. And then you also have the jacketed flat points, which these ones are just a straight upgrade to your weapon. And if you have hand loader, you probably want to change all of your regular rounds into these, because these ones give you more damage. They also punch through armor, and they make your gun more accurate, and they come with no downside. So they are fantastic. They're really, really good. For a basic rating for the K9000 gun on my tier list, I think I'd put the regular one into B tier. It's an overall okay weapon. It always feels kind of awkward to me, but if I have an excess of 38 special or 357 rounds, I will take something like this just to empty them out, and I've never really been dissatisfied with this weapon. I usually don't take it over something like the Cowboy Repeater or something like Lucky, but even so, I would say that this weapon is the best of those weapons if I'm taking it to a multi-fight, or if I'm fighting multiple enemies in quick succession. That one is probably the best one, even though the Cowboy Repeater and Lucky I do tend to lean towards more often because they're just kind of more handy and light to carry around. There is a modded version of the K9000 as well that we need to talk about. The K9000 gets 2 mods. You do need to kind of do a quest for these, although you could get them before or I guess during the quest, whichever works for you. And then you buy these from the Sync. The Sync is actually the only vendor that will sell these. They'll also be the only vendor that will sell the LAER parts too. So the K9000 gets the Mentat Chow, and they get the Wrestler Royal. The Mentat Chow increases your rate of fire by 40%, so you get even more DPS, and it makes it so that it shoots really fast. It's kind of surprising whenever I throw this on as how fast it shoots compared to the regular version. The Wrestler Royal, getting a little bit tongue-tied here, gives you 2 more damage. 2 more damage is okay. Going from 26 damage to 28 damage is pretty good for a full auto weapon. The other part, the Mentat Chow, is going to be the bigger buff though. 40% increased rate of fire is really good for a full auto weapon, and it makes so your DPS shoots up quite a bit, which is awesome. This one I would just say is a straight upgrade to the regular K9000, and I would put this one a tier higher, up into A tier. It's a pretty decent weapon overall that kind of does well at close to medium range, kind of what you would want for this. Let's talk about the unique version now. This is Fido. Fido looks different and, well, kind of functions different. It's also one of the few weapons that changes caliber, so instead of shooting 357, this one shoots 44 Magnum. Fido also is red in color. It also has a red scope. These guns do have scopes if you ADS with them, which is kind of weird. They're very awkward to be using as a scope, but they do have it. You also have like a bulldog picture on this one too, which is kind of cool. And the way that you make Fido is that you need to find a schematic. Once you have the schematic, you can go to a workbench, and then you can convert any of your K9000 guns into Fido. So that's why you can have multiple Fidos, or you can have multiple K9000 guns, or both. It's kind of weird that you can do that with unique weapons, but there you go, you can. You can do that with a couple other ones too, I guess, with like superheated knives, superheated Saturite fists, because otherwise they're just kind of common weapons. Fido requires 85 guns and 9 strength. This is one of those weird ones in Old World Blues where it requires a weird amount of guns. 9 strength is very high though. This one does 36 damage per shot, which is pretty good. 252 damage per second, also quite good. This one follows the trend of the K9000 gun and having half of its crit damage as opposed to its regular damage, so 18 crit damage. Still not sure why they did that. The same crit modifier at 0.06, and this one requires 1 more action point to use in VATS, so 28, which still makes it pretty good to be using in VATS. This one holds 50 rounds in it as well. This one has more spread at 1.5, surprisingly. I don't know why it actually has more spread than the regular K9000 gun. I guess because it's more powerful, so it's going to bounce around more. This one still weighs 27 weight, and it has 500 item health. You do also have different ammo, since this one does fire the 44 Magnum, so you have the regular 44. You've got the hollow point rounds, which work the same way as the 357 rounds. Or at least the hollow point rounds that the 357 has. This one also has 44 special rounds, which work basically the same way as the 38 special do. So you find them, it's just going to break your gun slower, but you'll do less damage. And then you have the semi-wad cutter rounds, which make it so you also do more damage and you can punch through armor. But these ones do break your gun substantially faster. So you may not want to be using these because they do break it actually pretty quick. You do actually have a bonus with the semi-wad cutter rounds for the 44 though, because you don't need the hand loader perk in order to get them. You can go up to North New Vegas and then talk to a guy named Jules. If you talk to him up there and pass a skill check, then he will give you the recipe and you can make this at any reloading bench that you would like to. That is pretty cool since you don't need the perk, but honestly I don't really use those rounds in this gun. I'd rather use those rounds in like my trail carbine or in my 44 Magnum. I don't think Fido is the best just because it breaks so fast. Fido I actually wouldn't say is any real better than the modified version of the K9000. But it does fire a completely different round, so that is kind of useful, especially if you want to take both these and you find yourself getting an excessive amount of 357 or 44 Magnum. So I'd also put Fido up into A tier. I think it is a pretty decent weapon overall. Would I recommend using the K9000 guns in Fido? Maybe? I don't use them very often, honestly. They're kind of heavy, they're kind of awkward, and they're using bullets that I usually use in other weapons. But if you have an excess amount of those, then they can be pretty decent. They're very weird guns, they're very unique guns, so if you wanted to have a dog gun that growls at people and that you can look at through the scope, and it also has ears, and it also has a dog brain in it, I don't think any other game is going to have all that combination for you, so at least it has that very specific niche for that, like, one guy that really wanted that. Tell me your thoughts on the K9000 and Fido down in the comments below. I would love to hear them. I honestly really would for this particular weapon, more so than most of the other weapons we've talked about, because this is such a strange and bizarre weapon. And yeah, tell me if you guys use it or how you guys use it, because I would really be interested. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye, everybody.